Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm up bright and early, so if I look a little puffy, that's why, because we're going to be doing a first impression tutorial and just my overall thoughts, swatches of the new Pat McGrath holiday palette. This is the Celestial Odyssey palette. Full disclaimer, I filmed with this all day yesterday, started editing my footage, and I really just didn't like the look that I did. I wasn't proud of it. I tried to do just a look that was really difficult, and I don't know why I do that to myself. So today I'm just going to do a look I know I love on myself. That way I can really showcase the palette in ways that I would use it. This palette is $78. I picked it up at the Pat McGrath website. So she did come out with her entire holiday 2021 collection. Last week the palette became available in I think a couple bundles, and then she just released the remainder of her holiday 2021 collection, which is like a highlighter, there's quads, there's lip balms, and there's trios, like 2 blushes and a highlighter. I will link all of that down below. I wish Pat would just release it all at once because it gets confusing even for me. I'm like, wait a minute, this is available here, this is available here. So all the information will be down below where you can get this, but you can get it from the Pat website or Sephora, just depending on what your preference is. So a little bit about this palette. It is made in the USA. It is limited edition. There are 18 shadows in here with 5 different finishes, and you get 1.1 gram per shadow. So in terms of the packaging, this is what the front of the palette looks like. It has the logo, and then when you turn it over, you have the sticker with all of the names of the shadows on there. It does have a magnetic closure, and then when you open it up, here are the shades. They do look a little bit, you know, not perfect because like I said, I was swatching it and I filmed with it yesterday. You also do get a large mirror, and the one thing I don't really like is these ribbons. There's like ribbons to hold the mirror up, which not really my favorite, but one thing I do like, and I noticed from comparing this to last year's palette, this shiny background and the logo in the middle, I feel like really elevates it and makes it look a lot more expensive. So let me show you the palette from last year. So here is the palette from last year. You can see it's a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner than this year's palette, but the biggest difference I noticed was the inside being the layout. So when you look at this palette from last year, it has that matte black background, and that really reminds me of, let's say, like a Morphe palette or maybe like BH Cosmetics palette. Not that it's a bad thing, but when you're paying Pat prices, I feel like I like that she changed it this year and she gave us that shiny background with the logo in the center. I know some people don't like when the shadows are kind of scattered, but I have to say, from comparing these, just looking at them, this looks more expensive, and I do believe that they're the same price. So I like that she upgraded the background of the shadows to have that shiny, I guess, background. I don't know why it makes a difference, but it does look more luxe and expensive to me, and you're paying high price for this, so I'm glad that she upgraded that. Now, in terms of the color story, last year's was very purple toned, lots of berries and purples. Of course, there was different shades in there, like some greens and golds, but it really leaned quite heavy on the purple side. Whereas this year, I feel like it's a lot different. It really doesn't have any purples in there. There's a couple berries, but it really has an array of different colors, lots of shimmers. There's only 4 mattes in here, and last year's only had 3 mattes. So I think the goal of this is to really play around with different textures in terms of the shimmers, whether that's metallic, iridescent, duochrome, or satin. So I think that's really where these palettes excel. So that's pretty much everything I have to say about this palette. I've shown you some swatches and all of that. I want to jump in to doing an eye look. That's why I don't have anything else on. I tend to like my looks when I do my eyes first, so I'm gonna go ahead and do my eyes as I normally would, and then I'll finish my face and give you my final thoughts. So I will link this palette down below, both at Sephora and Pat's website, depending on your preference, as well as her holiday 2021 collection. I'm going to be reviewing the highlighter, so that will be coming. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and start this eye look. So I'm going to start off with this matte shade in the crease. So I'm going to start blending this into my crease, and I can tell you a little bit about my experience with this palette. When I filmed yesterday, I really just didn't like the look like at all. It was too heavy, and sometimes I feel like I try to do different techniques, maybe that aren't the most flattering on me because I want to try different stuff, but sometimes it just doesn't work out, and I ended up really not liking the look on me, but the shadows performed beautifully. So what I noticed is the mattes are incredibly pigmented. I'm sure you can see here, very pigmented mattes. They are a little bit powdery, so just keep that in mind. You want to tap your brush off and just make sure that you're blending because a lot of pigment comes off of them. Now, I do wish that maybe there was more than just 4 mattes in here, but I think, again, her holiday palettes are sort of all about the iridescent sparkle, and you're really kind of getting to experience different formulas from Pat that are, I would say, shimmery, metallic, duochrome, and there's a lot to choose from in here. So next I'm gonna go into the deepest matte, which is this deep brown, and I'm just gonna apply this to the outer corner of my eye. Again, very pigmented. I used a lot of this yesterday, actually like a ton of it, and it is insanely pigmented, so you really don't need a lot of it. So I'm just applying this to the outer part of my lid, and then I'm just going to blend into the crease here. So sort of sweeping my brush just in. And then you can go in with your first brush, and I just like to do this to make sure that my edges are blended, but these mattes are very, very pigmented. I could see how they may be a little bit intimidating. I feel like they're not the easiest mattes to work with. I don't really think Pat's mattes are the easiest in general. They work well enough, but I notice like sometimes they seem to stick down a little bit. I feel like I have to work a little bit harder to blend them. So for the lid, I really don't know what color I want to use, but I do want to swatch a couple for you just to kind of give you an idea of the different finishes. So yesterday I actually used this shade, which was really beautiful, but I feel like with the deep brown that I used, it almost was just a little bit too deep overall. I didn't have enough brightness, but this to me looks like a perfect metallic. There wasn't a ton of fallout, but it's super intense. This is a dry swatch, by the way. Very smooth. And then you move into this green shade, which is gorgeous, but this is a little bit chunkier, a little bit more metallic, has some glitter in there, and it also has some fallout. This one's a little bit chunkier in the pan, a little bit more fragile, so just keep that in mind. And then you have this bronze shade, which is stunning. It's like a duochrome pink bronze, and this one is a little bit chunkier again like the green one, but it has that duochrome shift. So when I'm swatching these, there's a lot of different textures. There's even this peachy one, which I would say might be like my least favorite. It's just very subdued. I would think that this is more of a sateen. So you can see the different textures on here, and it's really hard to tell just on these swatches, but when you actually get the palette and you start touching it, you will notice right away which ones are chunkier, which ones have glitter, which ones are duochrome. So I think you're really getting an array of different textures to play with. So now the question is, what shade do I want to use? I actually think I'm gonna go in with this orange shade. I was looking at it yesterday, but I ended up going the other route. I'm gonna use a Sonia G worker brush, and I'm using this dry. Another reason why I like to do my eyes first, if I get a bunch of fallout, it's a lot easier to fix. I just reviewed the ABH Primrose palette, and the fallout was horrible. Like, it just drove me crazy. So that's why I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna do my eyes first. So I am going to put this on the inner part of my lid, and then I'm actually going to sort of run it into the crease a little bit. And this is dry. We might amp it up with a wet brush. I just want to get my placement first. So next I'm going to go into this shade, and I'm going to use my finger here, but I'm going to sort of blend this into that orange. And right now I'm just placing it. And now I'm going to take that Sonia G brush, and I'm just going to blend over and into the crease. I actually do like putting shimmers in the crease sometimes. I feel like it really looks a little bit more, I don't know, seamless. And I feel like the way that my eyes are shaped, I don't necessarily like just a shimmer on my lid all the time. And then I'm going back in with that deep brown just to really make sure we didn't lose the depth. So next I want to grab this shade, which looks like it's going to be, I feel like a satin. It's not as shimmery, and I'm going to use this to sort of mesh these shades. And then I can just take my brush to blend. All right, now that we have a rough placement, I'm gonna start wetting brushes and applying the shade. So I'm gonna wet this brush with my Urban Decay All Nighter, and I'm gonna go into that middle shade that we used. And I want to see it right here. I want to intensify this. Same thing with this orange. I am using a wet brush. Next, I'm gonna go into this beautiful champagne shade, and I'm using a Refer 26 damp. I'm gonna put this right in here. I'm trying to use as many shades as possible. It's kind of hard. Next, I'm gonna grab this matte pink, and I'm gonna use a really small brush and sort of outline where I just put that shimmer, just to give it a little bit more definition. And then I've got it on this fluffy brush, and I'm going to blend just to sort of tie it in to the rest of the shadow. So I went ahead and finished my makeup off camera. I will link everything I used down below. For the eyes, I just added a winged liner, a half lash, and then I did sharpen up just the crease here to make sure everything was blended, but now I wanna move on to the lower lash line. So for the lower lash line, I'm gonna start with the deepest matte in the palette, and I'm just going to press this close up to my lash line. I think I'm only gonna go about halfway in. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of this matte with a fluffy, smaller brush, and I'm going to use this to just soften this. And then lastly, I am going to attempt to go into this yellow shade. See if I can put a little bit of this. Okay, I'm actually gonna mix it with this light shade just so I get a lighter effect. And then as we go into the inner corner, I'm doing more of the light shade. And then to finish the eye, I'm gonna take a little bit of this pink matte and just buff this underneath everything that I just did. I just want to bring in that pink. I don't know if I really love that yellow on the inner corner, but you know, we're already there. So just trying to use as many of the shadows as possible. So I'm just blending this, really smoking it out. All right, guys, so here's my finished makeup look, playing around with the new Mcgrath Celestial Odyssey palette, and I want to give you my first impression. So I try to use as many shimmers as possible. I typically wouldn't use this many shimmers, but because this is a shimmer heavy palette, I really wanted to try to showcase as many as possible, and I do think that you are really going to grab this for the shimmers. For the different textures, different colors, I like that it's not all purple based or one shade based. I feel like this year she really did kind of go outside of the box and give us a lot of different colors like green and pink and gold and orange and blue. You can really kind of do whatever you want. I think the packaging is beautiful. The mattes in this palette are very pigmented. They can be a little bit powdery, so you definitely want to tap in and then tap your brush off. They also can give me a little bit of trouble blending. I just feel like I might have to work a little bit harder, but I really think in this palette you're paying for all the different metallics and shimmers and duochromes, and that's really why it's heavy on the shimmers. I mean, you only have 4 mattes out of 18. So it's really a shimmer metallic heavy palette. I like that she gave us different options. Last year's was a lot of purple. This year there is basically no purple, a ton of different other shades. But overall, I'm quite happy to have this. I think it's a great price to get all these different shades. And even though the pans are smaller, I don't typically go through palettes or eyeshadows very often. If I do, it's a transition or a matte shade. So I think it's a fair price for what you're getting. It feels luxe, and the formula is great. So I will link this palette as well as everything else I used today down below. I will also link the rest of the Pat McGrath holiday collection if you wanted to check that out. But I want to know your thoughts. What did you think about how this palette performed? Did you pick it up? Are you interested in it? I really enjoyed her palette from last year, and I feel like this is an elevated version, so I'm quite happy to have it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you want me to review next. If you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.